Hans! Get us back to the outpost, Jack reminded him, and his driver quickly got them moving forward again. One of the biggest benefits of the Cossacks hovering was that they could travel as fast over a field as they could a road, or most flattish surfaces, really. He took a moment to close his eyes and rub his face now that the shooting seemed to be over. The scout had escaped, but since the train was dead, it really didn't seem to matter. Now that they weren't chasing after the scout, Hans wasn't pushing the engines as hard, which was fine with Jack. He thought about unfastening his harness, but decided against it, since there might still be resistance at the outpost, which, he realized, could be a huge issue if they were about to drive into hostile guns. "We really need a working radio," Jack muttered as they quickly approached the outpost once more. As they got near it, he was about to have a heart attack, as he saw the guns had been turned out to face the road, but when he saw the red flag still waving, he relaxed a bit. There were figures waving at them from the outer bunkers now, which was a good sign. As they pulled back into the center of the outpost, there was a cluster of soldiers off to the right sitting on the ground, with a number of militia with red armbands standing around them. Looked like things had gone well, aside from him blowing up the very comm tower they wanted to capture. Hans spun them around to face back out the main gate, and then settled them down gently on the ground. "I'm going to see what I can do with the fans," he said then, unbuckling his harness while Jack and Cindy did the same. "We'll keep you covered just in case," Jack mentioned as his driver opened his hatch to climb out of his seat to get out and work on repairing their turbo fans. Jack cycled through the screens for a moment to make sure that everywhere he looked, the rebel militia had things under control. He could see one of their leaders talking to a group of them while Four Eyes stood next to him. He had trouble remembering the kid's name, so he just called him Four Eyes because of the glasses. Thankfully, the Desvians didn't have any sort of term like that for people who wore glasses, so he didn't take it the wrong way. Then again, after saving him from the conscript convoy, the kid might not mind. "What's that one guy's name again?" Jack asked then. "Their leader or captain or whatever." "Selithos," Cindy reminded him, and he nodded. "Lots of new names to remember all of a sudden. We really need to get them to start using call signs. Once they know enough English." Jack would make a note of that to tell Leola the mechanic. That would probably be a good idea for a lot of reasons. Makes it harder to the enemy to track and identify them as well, Cindy added, which made Jack nod. Yeah, Leola, especially now that she's their de facto leader. He hadn't seen her while checking the screens, so he assumed she was inside the outpost somewhere. "What? Leola? You don't think Selithos is in charge?" Cindy asked, and Jack shrugged. "He seems to be in charge of the militia forces that are defecting, but Leola is always the one coming up with the plans. Then again, I don't think either one is terribly concerned with being crowned leader of the resistance." Jack watched the Desvian talk with the other militia around him, giving out orders. He seems to know what he's doing in the field. He was an officer, also a bastard, so I'm guessing he was probably going to rise in the militia if we never showed up, Cindy informed him. "Not all officers have to be assholes," Jack mentioned. "I haven't interacted with him too much. Is he a real jerk?" There was a pause before Cindy laughed softly. "No, not. He's literally a bastard. His father was a noble, but his mother wasn't married to his father." Jack nodded slowly at that. "Oh, right. This is a society where literal bastards are a thing. So does that make him a half noble? Or something? I don't know how all that works. Think we can trust him?" He looked back over his shoulder at Cindy, then who smirked a little. "If I didn't before, I certainly do now that I've slept with him." Jack couldn't help but widen his eyes and lean back in surprise, and Cindy laughed at his expression. That's pretty much what I expected. Clearly she wanted to see his surprise. Jack finally got control of himself again and blinked a few times as he tried not to look like he was so completely shocked. "I just didn't expect it." He wasn't quite sure what else to say and then just shrugged. "This might shock you, but I have desires as well. I saw Hans with some of the oh-so-thankful Desvian girls in town after we liberated them, and I was curious." She looked up for a moment before shrugging. "Then here comes this nice-looking Xeno with a decent build trying his best to speak to me in English, and I could just tell." "So he came on to you?" Jack was curious, but he didn't want to pry too hard. "Yeah, She nodded at that and looked up at the ceiling of the tank again before nodding harder. Yeah, he did. How was it, if you don't mind me asking? Jack was still too curious to stop himself from digging a bit deeper, and Cindy laughed, running a hand through her short hair for a moment. Good. Different. Not like us. Jack nodded at that while she seemed to take her time to form her words. He and her had fooled around from time to time over the years. It wasn't really like they wanted a relationship, but at times with all the combat and death and strife, you sometimes just need someone to hold close. It was interesting taking a more commanding role. Jack arched a brow at that, and she laughed again. Let's just say he was very open and receptive to my suggestions, which was interesting because he only knows perhaps a dozen words of English, so there was a lot of non-verbal communication, but we made it work. Jack nodded slowly and couldn't help but smile as he saw her smile. Well, sounds like you had fun. Certainly nice to have a more insightful view of them than our driver. Cindy laughed at that and nodded. Yeah, I'm not sure we'd get anything useful from him about their society, but now that I've let you in on my little secret, it is staying between us, right? Jack nodded as she said that. Oh yeah. Don't worry, not even a whisper of it to Hans. He's bad enough as it is. No need to toss napalm on the fire. Jack snorted at the thought of Hans finding out. They'd never hear the end of it. So, about my more insightful view, I've noticed that they're used to someone else being in charge. So if you just take the lead and act like you're in charge, they seem to assume you really are. I'm not sure if that'll help us out much since we're clearly Xenos, and we can't pose as a Desvian, but just something to keep in mind. Jack nodded as she told him that, and scratched his chin as he tried to think about how that might help him. Either way, he'd keep it in his mind. You know, I'm having a hard time figuring this society out, he mentioned. They've got a sizable interstellar empire, right? Ships that obviously can travel faster than light and plenty of high-tech weapons. So, how did they remain feudal? I'm not super read up on history or anything, but I thought that the rise of machines and especially guns killed out class societies like this back on Earth. I think you forget they're not human, so they might not behave the same. They seem to be as concerned about fur patterns and colors as humans used to be about race. It's probably drilled into them from birth. They also seem to advance slower. Maybe by the time they had guns, there was already just one kingdom on their home planet. So the military controlled everything? I really can't say for sure. I mean, look how quickly the lower classes here have taken up arms against the royal forces. Maybe they just never had a single really concerted revolution across enough planets to succeed. So instead, a planet here or there rises up and the military crushes it. Jack nodded slowly as Cindy said that. It certainly made sense. Any idea why they don't use computers? He asked then, and she nodded. Ah, that one I do know. A few centuries back, they had some sort of AI uprising, and once the organics across the sector put a stop to it, they outlawed anything too intelligent. As she told him that, Jack frowned. So, they've got shield generators all over the place without computers? How's that possible? How do they manage the energy? What sort of reactors do they have to power those tanks without needing computer controls either? She held up her hands as he asked those questions and shrugged. All I said was anything too intelligent. I'm sure they've still got computers in some form, but since it's a class-based society, how much do you want to bet that they're only for the military and nobles? Jack thought it over and nodded slowly. That does make more sense. He realized they wouldn't care about making life easier for the peasants. They probably needed to keep busy so they didn't think about rebelling more often. If you've got to work 60 hours a week, you have a lot less time to plan a revolution. Jack looked back at his screen then, and saw 4 eyes approaching the tank, so he opened his hatch and stood up in his seat to wave at the Desvian. Jack! They had an easier time with Jack than Po Bishaquasho. You get scout? We got the train. Right away, he realized the kid didn't know what he meant. Ah, choo-choo. Chuga, 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 choo-choo. He tried to sound out, and the Xeno looked more confused. He just sighed and set his hand over his face as he realized he was trying to make train noises to their translator. Tracks! He pointed out at the road. Train tracks. Armored train? No. You don't get any of this, do you? He slowly shook his head and sighed, as he had clearly confused the kid even more by this point. Naff? Jack had very quickly learned the Desvian word for what. It came up a lot when he tried to talk to them. Yeah. He sank back down into the tank then and looked back at Cindy. Do you have any idea how to... He was staring to say, but she was already flipping through the phrasebook she'd been making. No, I have no idea how to say train. She shook her head as she flipped through the pages. Fuck, Jack muttered with a sigh. But as he got back up, he saw the kid was yelling to another rebel up in one of the towers. He watched them yell back and forth for a moment before the kid turned back to him, wide-eyed and excited. That you kill Cass and Anguilla? The kid had the same sort of happy yet surprised look Jack had seen so often lately. Sure, I guess. If Cass and Anguilla means a train covered in turrets. Jack shrugged, figuring that was what they were talking about. But then the kid frowned. But scout not for Cass and Anguilla. Scout for... He held the front of his muzzle in a gesture Jack had learned meant he was thinking. Aye, light royal soldiers. He slowly sounded out, and Jack frowned. Elite royal soldiers? He tried, and Four Eyes nodded. I light royal soldiers. He dropped the plural on the royal, but still sounded out elite, a little odd. Fuck, Jack sighed out. Some small part of him felt a bit better that he'd missed an elite Desvian, and not just some militia type, but it still wasn't good news. Where is Leola? He tried then, and Four Eyes pointed at the half-ruined comm tower in the corner. Well, go get her! As Four Eyes ran off to get the mechanic, Jack leaned over the side to see Hans working on the fans. How's it looking? Luckily, fairly minor damage. I won't be able to get them back to 100% here with what I've got, but once we get it back to the shop, it shouldn't be much trouble. Jack nodded as he was finally given a bit of good news. When he looked back towards the comm tower, he saw Leola heading towards him. When she got close, he was about to ask her for a sit rep, but she already had that idea. Radio, yes, good. She gave him a thumbs up. But talk into space. No. She gave him a thumbs down as he groaned. Give time can make radio for armor. She slapped the side of his tank. I hear you kill Cass and Anguilla? Armor! Fighting. She extended her hands to try and give him the idea of it being something big, and he nodded. Good, yes? But is not, connect to scout. Yeah, I got that, he said. So what does that mean? Is group. Very bad. For why? Very good soldiers. She struggled with the words, but he couldn't fault her since her English was much better than his Desvian. That's a scout for an elite royal unit? He clarified, and she nodded. Armor? He asked, and again she nodded. How many? She shrugged for a moment and called out to Salithos. He picked up a couple words about armor and some numbers, but they were talking too quickly for him to get anything specific. Armor. She held up both hands at him and then closed them into fists and opened them again. 20? Fuck, he groaned out. They'd been having little trouble killing their militia armor, but he wasn't sure what to expect from this elite unit. Soldiers? He asked then, and she called out to Salithos again. Same number each armor. Jack sighed as she told him that. So 20 tanks and 20 elite soldiers for each one. This wasn't good, especially since the outpost was hardly secure yet. He rubbed his hand over his face as he thought it over and then nodded. Okay, we'll go slow them down, give you time to set up. Then we'll fall back here and see how it all goes. We'll buy you as much time as we can. He was wondering if any of that was getting to her, but she soon shook her head. No. You kill Cass and Anguilla! That is mean no... shoeport. It carry... meanings of war? He frowned as she tried to piece together what she was saying for a moment before it clicked. Support? That train carried their supplies? He tried, and she talked to Four Eyes for a moment before they both nodded. So, they can't fight yet? He asked, and they shook their heads. How long do we have? Once more they spoke quietly, seeming to try and figure it out before Leola finally shrugged. Many day. Many. But not many. Well, that was better than them being just around the corner. Jack thought it over and nodded once more. Okay, we need radio. And we need explosives. Boom. Big boom! Can we get big boom? He tried, and Leola nodded. I'm placed to know, but of need time. We save more town in time. More people for fight! Soon make radio. She looked ready to add something, but there was a call from up above. He looked up to see a Desvian in one of the towers shouting down to them. Trucks! Trucks come! Go stop! Got it. Hans! He called out, but his driver was already tucking his tools back into their hatch as he climbed up on the tank. On it, LT! Jack was about to climb back down into his seat when he saw Four Eyes waving at him. No boom truck. Truck of me? He patted his chest. Truck like of me. Jack thought that over before calling back. Trucks of conscripts? Kids. Kids like you? He pointed at Four Eyes, who nodded. Okay. I won't destroy the trucks. I'll just knock out their escort. The Desvian stared at him for a few seconds before responding. Naff? Jack just sighed and shook his head. Fuck it, no boom truck. No boom! Four Eyes smiled at that and gave him a thumbs up as Jack dropped back into his seat. Hans was climbing back into his own, and soon they were rising up off the ground. Well, it looks like we're about to get some new recruits for the rebellion. Did you ever think you'd be commanding an army? Cindy asked, and Jack snorted. Not a fucking clue, though I'm not sure this is really an army just yet. He sealed his hatch as he began to buckle up, and Hans decided to weigh in. I did. An army of scantily clad warrior women, chainmail bikinis, slutty battle nuns, bi-curious elf bitches. The works! While that did sound exactly like something Hans might dream about, Jack didn't really want to hear about it right now. Shut the fuck up, Hans. Jack growled as he loaded a dummy round into the cannon. You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I might need to read the field manual and see if it has any suggestions, or give a copy to Leola, though I'm not sure if she'll be able to read any of it. The field manual? Who needs that? I never read it, Hans said as Jack couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, well that's because it's not a picture book. Then to his surprise, Cindy chimed in. Actually, it's got some very good pictures and diagrams even if there's a lot of small complicated text to accompany it. If anything, you should read the section on developing an insurgent native force for asymmetrical warfare. Jack stared back at Cindy as she told him that. That's in the field manual? Shit, I really wish I'd read it now. I guess I better start tonight. Anyway, Hans, get us moving! As they began to move forward and out of the outpost, he could see the convoy off to their right. It was a good thing they were coming from the opposite direction of the derailed train, or it just might have tipped them off that not everything was about to go well for them. Every convoy they liberated was another batch of rebels for their cause. Jack was sure that they'd eventually run out of willing recruits as they expanded, but for now he knew a conscript transport only meant one thing. Time to make some new friends.